A lot of people just think they're in the 3D model and they're like, all right, where's the view? There's the view. All right, export, boom, Photoshop. All right, it doesn't look good. Oh, look shit. And then you're back in this process of like, oh, I have to go find a new view or something. Plan your view rigorously. Diane Ladiocan says, what laptop do you use in your workflow, or do you use PC in doing these drawings?
I was not a very tech savvy person back when I was doing my part two. That's for sure. So I was running everything off a laptop, um, but and then halfway through I had to get a new one, or you're either using university, like what they have in uni, which is very helpful, but that tends to be a struggle because you have to come in super early, try and claim a computer before one person renders on 20 computers. So I think, yes, definitely a good tip and a very good question for whoever's intending to do some beautiful drawings in the future. Get a good laptop, get a good computer. It's worth the investment for the future.
100%. I'll add to that as well that you are going to struggle to do these drawings with a machine that is not powerful. So yeah, you may want to make sure you get a machine with high RAM, a machine with high memory capabilities. Ideally, you want to be on a PC, I think, because you're going to generally get better results on a PC. Because yes, these drawings are very large. You're going to have to be jumping between your 3D modeling, your your vector programs, your CAD programs. You need to be on a strong machine for these drawings, for sure. Tahir asks, Tahir Manga says, how was your workflow when working on the drawings?
So I think modeling the proposal, I'd work on it throughout the year. So obviously the architecture starts to be developed, but it's about composing it into the view. So I would have had a master plan and everything developed during that period. But you also learn and develop your drawings through modeling and also through doing the drawings itself. So the process of learning and developing a proposal doesn't ever stop. So I think there's always moments where you're modeling and then you make sure that towards the end of the day you can hit the render button or export lines before you go to bed. That's about, I guess, being somewhat efficient without really wasting that time. And it's also about knowing when to trace your material and when it's worth using a model and when it's worth tracing. And tracing is, to a degree, I guess, a sort of mindless activity, but the precursor to it is where you need to really concentrate on finding the right image. But the beauty of tracing is that in that time you can use your brain to sort of plan the next step. Do you plan the next drawing? Do you think about what to model next? Do you think about the color of what it could be while you're tracing it? So I guess it's like just trying to be efficient with your time and knowing the constraints of a computer model. And also to add on the previous question, I think modeling cleanly is very important because you can obviously reduce the size of your file and ensure that the lines you export come out of your model.
Just on that last comment, Eric, I'm going to give a big top tip to people. If you're on SketchUp, bloody make use of that 3D warehouse. That 3D warehouse is a beast. You can get models that, you can get components that are already modeled, bring them into your drawings and, add them to your crazy models. In terms of workflow, Tahir, I think I went quite deep into workflow with showing you the my presentation and Photoshop. I would just emphasize that first collage or the first kind of image, the overall composition of what you want to show, whether that's a collage, whether that's a sketch, whether it's both. It should be both. I think, sketch your vision, then try to get a collage to work, and then start to bring in all the technical aspects. That's so important. A lot of people just think they're in the 3D model and they're like, all right, where's the view? There's the view. All right, export, boom, Photoshop. All right, let me add. Oh, it doesn't look good. Oh, look shit. And then you're back in this process of like, oh, I have to go find a new view or something. Plan your view rigorously, I would say, and your workflow will be smooth.
Mm.
Sage says, how do you work out the line widths after modeling?
The line whips?
Yeah, I guess I guess that means the line weights.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I guess it depends on the scale in which you're going to do the drawing, whether it's at A3, whether it's at double A0 or whatever it might be. And then the beauty of actually, exporting this line work or doing it in vectors, that you can always adjust the line weight as you go on in the proposal. So I think that depends on format, whether it's uh, physically or on screen, especially in this day and age where currently I'm sure a lot of architectural students are doing the tutorials and presenting online, that it's a different format when you're presenting digitally. So do you actually thicken the lines a bit more? Is presentation format predominantly now landscape because of the size and shape of our screens? And it just depends on the media and the scale in which you're doing these. And yeah, well, I'm sure you got something to add to that as well, Hamza, right?
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think I'll also just say that you will no doubt know about line weights. I think if it's a technical question, it depends, as Eric said, depends on what your, where your output is. If you're exporting a 3D model, you're often going to end up with a flat. You're going to end up with a standard kind of line weight because you don't have, as far as I know, the capability of decide line weights from 3D model exports. You can obviously decide that in a 2D CAD program like AutoCAD or MicroStation because you set those in your layers already. They're inbuilt. So it depends how you're exporting stuff. If you're exporting out from a 3D model, you're going to add that to your post-production, your Vectorworks or your CAD format, and you're going to change it, as Eric said, manually. I think the fact that you are kind of cognizant of line weights is the most important thing, because you can affect that and change that as you go. For example, in the drawings I was doing, I was not changing line weights kind of through CAD software. I was doing it through my actual Procreate drawing size. So it's a great question. As long as I think hopefully that should answer it. But as long as you're cognizant of line weights in any medium you're using, you should be on track. I hope that answers the question. And I think Eric definitely did. But would it be no? We're missing that. Okay, next question. So hopefully that would have answered the earlier questions. Okay, so Diana asks, I think this one's to you, Eric. Your drawings are full of wonder and imagination, but when you were doing them at uni, did you think about working at a traditional architecture practice and applying these skills there?
So when I was at uni, I didn't even think about practice in any way, shape, or form. I think when you're in uni, you just have to remember that life in uni, despite architecture being a very long course, 7 to 8 years or potentially 10 to qualify, that your rest of your life in architectural practice is the next 30, 40, 50 years, or whatever it might be. So if you put it into that context, architectural education is short. So definitely make the most out of it when you can, and just embrace the creative freedom you have, and indulge in your individual interests and what you're learning at that time, because you have got years and years of doing door schedules for the rest of your life or whatever it might be. So yeah, I just kind of went for it. And yeah, it wasn't, I think in architecture it's a strange course as well. It's never a really tick boxing exercise, or it's about, you if you, I remember my tutor telling me that if you knew what you're going to do the next day, you might as well not get up, right? So it was very much about just exploring as I went along and learning day by day, and just producing and knowing that you're growing and learning day by day, right? But yeah.
Another thing interesting on that topic is actually these skills that you learn from doing this, although they might not be, exactly directly replicable in your practice, the technical skills you're learning are immense, and you can apply them not just to your practice in a traditional architecture firm, but as Eric knows with his, I don't know if I can announce it or anything, but maybe you can if you have time or if you want to. You can apply it to all sorts of different opportunities that you can open up for yourself, just with general illustration, with graphic design. So I think it's a good question, Diana, but there's something a lot broader going on here when you start to enter into the realms of doing these showpiece drawings. Eric, are you able to announce?
I'm not too sure, but I have been working with a very prolific and amazing animation director, and he's releasing a film out this year. And I just had the opportunity to work with him to develop some city work and concept art, and for this amazing animation that's coming out hopefully in the summer. And yeah, stay tuned. It should be very exciting. But what Hamza said is very interesting, and he really does address this in his podcasts about multidisciplinary and architects and within the profession delving into different realms. And it really is a profession that's very multidisciplinary. So all the skills you learn and develop, you can definitely apply it to illustration, animation, set design, or whatever else you might think of or entering or have an interest in the future.
Definitely. Thanks, Eric. Yeah. So guys, if just to remind you, if you want to check out the podcast that I did with Eric on the Two Worlds Design podcast, the link is in the description. You can open a new tab. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube as well. And yeah, I'll probably be doing a new episode with you, Eric, to officially announce this amazing news.
That'd be amazing.
So awesome. So I've got another question. So by Jamil Dossa says, more of a general question. Now that you've both finished your part twos, what do you miss most about the experience? Good question.
Go ahead, Hamza.
Why? You can't think of anything straight away?
No, I'm just saying. I guess it's quite fresh, right? In the sense
Good
that
point. Yeah, I guess I am a very competitive person. I guess I miss the competition of being in architecture school. It might sound a bit crazy for some people, but I like it. I also, I guess I would, if I was to go back, I would take. I mean, hindsight is a bitch, right? Sometimes if you have all these kind of insights at this moment, you wish you could have applied them before. So if I was doing part two again, I think my work would have been. I would have probably focused a lot more on making the most out of my projects in terms of narrative. I think I was a lot focused in my part two with just the technical aspects and just making sure I get a high grade. So there's a lot of lessons I've learned and a lot of things I kind of would maybe do different. I mean, I have no proper regrets in that sense, but I do miss the university kind of process and really taking pride with narrative. Narrative is a beautiful thing, and once you realize actually there's no judgment, and Tahir, who's here as well, hopefully I did a little kind of crit thing with him, and we talked about this notion of being confident in your vision, and university being the playground for that. It's unreal once you realize that you have complete freedom, no matter what your tutors say. You have complete freedom, free will to explore any projects, any crazy ideas, any narrative. Obviously, being respectful of the people who know more than you. So yeah, I miss kind of being imaginative with narratives for sure. You don't really
Mm,
get much of that in practice.
yeah, I totally agree. And I'm just reading through the question again. Like, now that you've both finished your part twos, what do you miss about the experience? And I guess for me, it's that wholehearted self-indulgence. I think the moment you finish part two and you find a job and you do your part three and you're working practice, you realize that your time starts to become a bit more limited in where you can, delve into those kind of interests, whether it's after work or on the weekend or wherever it might be. Whereas when you're back in uni, you think, "Oh my God, this is not going to end. I'm still day on day, and my weekend is for my own project." But actually, looking back, you had all the time in the world to think about your own project and to really draw for it and to develop it. And I think, in a crazy way, that's kind of why I miss the wholehearted day by day self indulgence of something that's interesting and amazing. Not that anything that's developing and obviously doing now is not interesting. They're equally interesting because you're growing and learning, whether in real practice or whatever it might be. But in the context of this question, that's what I miss.
Definitely. Do you miss the all-nighters, or did you
Definitely
do
not.
any?
Maybe did one or two at best. At
Guys,
best.
this is the crazy thing Eric talked about in the podcast as well, where he only did one or two all-nighters. He
Just
made it.
because printing issues towards the end when everyone has to run for the printer.
Wow, yeah, there's a lot of lessons we can learn from you, Eric. So I think one other question coming in is Zane says, how do you prevent the layers of these complex drawings from becoming convoluting, i.e., difficult to identify where they overlap? Good question.
I think your presentation addressed that quite well, how you are layering it through, right, Hamza?
Yeah, I just want to completely understand the question. So, how do you prevent the layers of these complex drawings from becoming convoluting, i.e., difficult to identify where they overlap? Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's I think it's trial and error, to be honest. I think there's a level of knowing what components you want to bring into your drawing and and how you're going to execute the finish, if that makes sense. So in my case, there was a photograph as the background. There was a model export from SketchUp. There was and then there was my drawings, my tracing on top of the photograph to match to match all those things together. And then I would pull the photograph away, obviously. And then once you end up with those two primary base things, you can start to add all the crazy details and nuances. So in terms of the foundational base, you've got your trace of your kind of environment and you've got your model that sits on top. I mean, this is the way I did it. Eric might have a different way he can explain. But yeah, this process can be complicated, as you saw, but you, I think if you spend, as I said, a lot of time in the beginning process, making sure you're jumping from, for example, you're jumping into the model and you're looking at the view of the model. Yeah, you take a screenshot. You don't export lines. You're just doing it just to check. So you take a screenshot, take that screenshot, overlay it onto the photograph that you've chosen. When you overlay it, you can say, okay, it works. Maybe the perspective or the depth of field is slightly wrong. Let me change the depth of field angle. So you'll go back to your model. You'll adjust it slightly. You'll bring it back. Does it work? Okay, it works perfectly. So with all of these things, you're making your perfect standing point, your starting point. And therefore, when you start to execute the drawing with the line work and all these things, you're more efficient and you're not kind of complicating it and overlapping. Everything fits basically. So that initial collaging part is very important for me.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that and saying that once you have a very clear vision of what you want to really express and what the key components are, you can start to have that clarity in your head. And I guess you sort that into folders in Photoshop. And I guess one of the very base ones is just knowing what your foreground is, your midground is, and what your background is. And once you really define that, then it becomes so much clearer because there's a certain information you're portraying in the beginning, in the front, and then there's a certain contextual thing in the background that you're trying to express in right at the back. And once you define those three, midground, background, foreground, it doesn't become so convoluting, and then it becomes a nice layered drawing with a series of information that you're trying to put across.
Great, yeah, great insights there, Eric. I would emphasize the idea of making sure you name your layers, put your things in folders, organize your shit, because that is how you will end up with a potential heart attack later down the
Yeah.
line.
Name your layers, not copy 102 of copy 107 or something.
Yes. Thanks, Zane. Great question, guys. You guys are asking brilliant questions, and don't be shy to ask the technical questions, guys. If there's, as Zane did, you know, make the most of Eric being here to ask him these technical things. Hakuto, I hope I'm saying your name right. Pearson says, do you have any tips or suggestions for plugins when exporting line work from SketchUp to Illustrator so that the different elements are separated into layers? Good question. I guess I'll ask it because I don't know if Eric, you use SketchUp that much, do you? You don't?
No, I don't know.
No. I think well, for what I did, I didn't actually use any plugins for exporting the lines from SketchUp because actually one of the reasons I like using SketchUp is because it has a very, if you're using SketchUp Pro, you have a very clean export process. It's a very you don't end up with crazy you know, ghost lines and crazy kind of complex issues as you do with, for example, doing Make 2D with Rhino. SketchUp is as you see it, you get what you see type program. So I didn't use any plugins, Hakuto. I just exported straight from Revit, from SketchUp. So I don't actually know. That's a very good suggestion for a plugin, though. If that doesn't exist,
Mm.
that would be an amazing. And I know they use API and open kind of software, so you should contact Autodesk, I believe, and suggest that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the lines being separated, but undoubtedly, I'm sure most of you know, exporting color ID and elements by that makes it a lot easier to fill in the elements that you like as well.
Oh, good. You just reminded me. Good point, Eric. Hakuto, the way of doing what you're suggesting actually maybe it's not a good idea. Maybe I spoke too soon. No, it's a good idea. I'm joking. But the way that I think you could do that manually would be literally you have your model, you've grouped it because you're a very organized modeler. You've grouped your components. Just hide the component of the model you need to hide and export them in increments and name your exports. You'll have to do that anyway. So it's a great question. I
Yeah,
think
that's a very good technique too.
Joel asks, how do you know where to model in SketchUp if you did not have the context modeled? Specifically for the last drawing, how do you avoid modeling the surrounding buildings and just trace them in? I've got a bit of ADHD. I might have to read that again. How did you
Me too.
know where to model in SketchUp if you did not have the context modeled? Good question. Very good question. Joel, this comes back to the trial and error thing I was explaining, where you find the view that you want, the killer view. And for me, it was out as if maybe in a helicopter looking down on this entire thing with a really large field of view, so you can get the full view of the vision. Because my whole concept was to display the idea of a urban sprawl, the idea of a new parasitic architecture kind of taking over the existing density of refugee camps. And I was only going to do that with a giant bird's eye view looking down in perspective. So I knew that's the view I wanted. It's a great question because this is the hardest part, getting these things to match up. So once I found the view I wanted around about in SketchUp, as I said to Zane, I just took a screenshot just for testing, no exports, just screenshot, brought that to my Photoshop file where I'd found the perfect photograph. So I found the perfect photograph first, but I'm not being precious with this photograph. It could change if I needed to, but then I overlay that screenshot with the photograph, and I can then see the model sitting on the refugee camp, if you like. Then I can see where the problems are, or where the angle needs to change, or where the perspective doesn't make sense, and then I come back to the the SketchUp model and make any amendments needed. And then I do that back and forth. If you do that for half an hour, you will end up with the perfect view.
I'd like to add to that this is a tool I literally only discovered recently, and it blew my mind. And it's called Photo Match. So with this amazing tool called Photo Match, it's you import a photo into your 3D file, and you have a few key points of one or two surrounding buildings, and you click the key buildings around to the photo, and it automatically matches the perspective of your actual 3D model to the photo, the flat 2D photo that you have. And so that's amazing. Sometimes it doesn't work because it doesn't quite acknowledge it, but when it does, it's pretty accurate and pretty
What
amazing.
software is that on?
That's actually on MicroStation.
So that's on MicroStation.
Yeah, this is literally Photo Match. You put in any aerial photo, you put in your context model and your main building. As long as you have a few reference points, you can always photo match it, which is
Guys, if
amazing.
anyone is I suppose someone is Googling that right now. If you find the link for that, just post it in the chat so people can get that too. Yeah, great questions, guys. Adam, great to have you, mate. Says many people seem to have a strong drawing style / visual architectural identity. Do you have any advice on finding your own unique way of drawing? Brilliant question. Eric, you take this one. to start?
Yeah, so let me read the question one more time. Many people seem to have a strong drawing style. Visionary. Do you have any advice on finding it? I think it depends on your project and what you do for the project, you know? Like if your drawing is set in Japan and embraces that culture and has a political position on within that context, then it would really embrace the sort of Japanese style of drawing. And if it's to do with something else, it would I think it takes the form of what your research thesis is. And that way it becomes very focused, very precise, and very like yeah, those are the two words, very focused and precise into what you're trying to do. And it becomes more meaningful because you're not just using a technique or method to kind of express what you're trying to talk about. So I guess in my drawings, they're very much to do with the UK, as I mentioned. So I really borrowed from British illustrators, graphic designers, and painters, and used the colors that they employed and to borrow from them to retain that kind of spirit of drawing.
Amazingly put, Eric. I think this kind of raises a kind of almost a philosophical question, or a very deep question that I think a lot of architecture students wonder about. I wonder about. I still wonder about. But from what I have kind of learned, architectural style is something you should really not worry about, as in having your own style. At all, really. I thought about this, that you shouldn't worry about it until you get to a point where maybe you're starting to establish yourself and you see what you're good at, and then just hone in on that. But even then, I mean, I might be different in this sense. That might be a way you should go, but I have a different view on this, in that I want to be as explorative as kind of add as many kind of style, you know, knowledges of different styles as possible. I want to be able to experiment, try as many different aesthetics as I can, learn as many different aesthetics as I can. I think if you see my Instagram, that's the first thing you'll notice, is how there's completely different drawing styles in nearly every post, because I personally take a lot of pride in trying different drawing styles, as this one was kind of inspired by Eric in some ways, but I brought my own kind of logical, pragmatic vision to it as well. Whereas Eric's drawings are very, exploring much more fictional themes. I think, in terms of having advice of finding your own unique way of drawing, that is a great question. Again, I think in terms of you're not necessarily seeking a style in that sense, but having a unique way of drawing, I think you have to find what you're good at eventually by experimenting as much as you can. And you might realize, I'm really good at hand drawing, or this is where my kind of skill or talent lies, and explore that. I think you might also realize, oh, I'm really good at putting the compositional aspects of drawings together. Explore that. I know some of you here already, I know, some of you, for example, are amazing at, doing abstract drawings. So I think experiment as much as you can. And if you really want to, hone in on something that you feel like you're good at.
No, I agree. I think it's much to do with just you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and you can just borrow from the right references. And I'm sure as you go through architectural education and life, that you build up a good bank of references that you love and you get inspired by, and you can always just borrow from them and go, these are the colors I like. I like the composition of this drawing. I like the drawing style of this particular drawing. And you kind of interrogate it, get curious about it, and then you never know, you might use it for a future project in some way, shape, or form.
Exactly. I also say that, through doing so many different types of drawings on my page, I actually, got told by people, "Oh, this is your style," and I was like, "Really? That's my style?" And I was told that I, have an industrial kind of, um, I'm not blowing gas up my ass by being told this, but the idea that my drawings look like Lebbeus woods, so that style, I realized that is something I really love. So it makes sense that's my style, but I never sought that style. I never tried to have a particular style. I never prescribed myself a style. It just emerged by doing things I loved, out of trying to be as free as I can. So yeah,
Mm, and,
great question.
and one last thing, and once you keep doing it and you keep repeating it, you start to improve on it day and day, and then that way, I guess it just becomes yours because you're more confident in doing it day by day because it's not the first time you do it, right?
So you agree, Eric, that it's all about just exploring as much as you can and being as free as
Yes,
you can with it.
exploring, but also repetition, practice makes perfect, and putting the time into it, I guess.
Brilliant. I've just been being told by them, but photo merge is on Photoshop and photo merge is on SketchUp. I'll
Is
be
it
googling.
is it photo merge or photo match or okay, fine, let's see.
We'll get into these
Yeah.
technical things later, but if yeah, thanks for mentioning
Thank you.
that, Blessing and Robert.
Thank you.
We probably have time for one more question, and Blessing says, following on from Adam, how do you create a visual style for portfolio renders when short on time? Interesting question. Do you want to start this one, Eric?
How do you create a visual style for portfolio renders when short on time? I, am not sure this question is too applicable to me in the sense that I don't think I render much, so I don't plan for that time or the knowing that technology can hold you back in short periods of time like stresses me out sometimes. But do you
Yeah,
maybe yeah
I think perhaps Blessing, you're talking about. I assume you're talking about your professional portfolio or your university portfolio. In that, when you want to present a project, there should be a coherent style for each project. In that case, I would say follow the style in which your project already is in, and as Eric said, that your project and your style of your drawings will follow a particular narrative, right? So if you are exploring Japanese tea houses, for example, then it might be a smart thing to introduce that to the kind of ornamentation and the kind of lettering and character styles of your portfolio, or it might just be in the nuances of your drawing, and that's all you need. I think when it comes to portfolios, that can be quite a deep line of questioning where you said, yeah, when presenting and applying for placements. Right. So in the professional world, yeah, I think when you're talking about your portfolio, um, that can lead us down a rabbit hole because there's so many different ways in which you can present your portfolio. It can be personal, it can be project based, it can be narrative based, it can be minimalistic, it can be so many things. So I'm not sure I completely get the question when you refer to renders, but if you mean in having a coherent style, I think just choose what you think will be best, whether it's a project-based kind of aesthetic for your portfolio or a kind of an overall concept style for your portfolio. Yeah, we are very punctual, Eric, and
very punctual,
amazing
yeah.
questions by everyone. Thank you guys so much. If there's any emergency questions, fire away quickly. Otherwise, we will end it there. And I'll just say quickly before we sign out, thank you again to all of you who've tuned in. Thank you to Eric for taking the time to go through this with us. Please, please, please go and check out the links in the description so you can follow my work, so you can follow Eric's work, and you can also tune into the podcast where we go into things a lot more deep about the Bartlett kind of culture. We talk about all sorts of things to do with drawings.